Hello listeners, we are your co-hosts Janine Bailey and Marie Quigley for the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. Empower World brings guests who are making a difference to the world to inspire coaches and leaders who lead with mind, heart and soul. Hello and welcome. My name's Marie Quigley, co-founder of Empower World, and today I'm not with Janine, the amazing Janine Bailey. I'm with the wonderful Roger Fielding, who I've known for a few years now. And Roger's had some exciting news in the world of coaching. And so I was thinking, what could we do to celebrate? And this is one way of celebrating Roger and his achievement, is to get together and explore how he got his drumroll MCC. So Roger, you and I are going to talk about the process of how you've got your MCC and share any wisdom, thoughts, reflections to our listeners as to maybe how you did it, why you did it, and how it's impacted you. So Roger, welcome to the call.
Thank you, Marie. Looking forward to it. Very happy to have the conversation and to share the celebrations with you.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy to celebrate because you've put a lot of work into this, and I'm very grateful to have that we have worked together on this to support you to get where you've got to.
I have put a lot of work into it. It's at least possible you have put in more work, Marie, because our work over the last 2 or 3 years, as you have worked as my mentor, have been terrific. But we've put a lot of time into it together.
We have, Roger. Before we begin, how about you give our audience an idea of who you are and what you do and how long you've been doing this thing called coaching, and give them some context as to who you are in the world.
I've been self-employed since 2010, so 14 years. There are really two things I do in my business, Roger Fielding Consulting Limited. One is design and deliver leadership programs. The other is to do one-to-one coaching. And the first thing I did when I left the headhunting consultancy, the European headhunting consultancy I previously worked for, was to realise I needed to get credentialed and recognised as a coach, because that would be probably a box I needed ticking if ever I was selling my wares to a professional buyer. However, of course, it wasn't just eventually about credentialing. I thought I could coach when I left that consultancy. I didn't know anything. So the fantastic, but I thought I needed that. And then moving on to the credentialing, once again, I learned so much. So that was my ACC associate.
So you got trained, Roger. You were working in the world of coaching, and you realised you wanted to become credentialed with ICF.
Yeah.
Well, what was the reason for choosing ICF for you?
Well, when I was with the consultancy, they did ask me if I would go for a weekend with the ICF, along with the company in the Netherlands, which I did. Loved it. So I'd already got that connection of 3 days of ICF training before, that's a year or 2 or 3 before I left. So I had the connection with ICF training and liked it. Mm-hmm. Well, CTI, should I say. CTI was the training. But I went with ICF because my work was international, and I was doing work in different European countries, and thought the International Coach Federation was probably one to go for. And then to go back, if the training was CTI, it's affiliated with the ICF, and then it just led naturally to that.
Yeah, and for those who don't know CTI, that's the Coaches Training Institute that Roger trained in, and I actually also trained with them as well. So that's just a common coincidence, isn't it, Roger, that we trained with the same organisation all those years ago.
Yeah, and liked it, liked their model, liked their approach, and liked their approach to coach training, which was all about interactive, interpersonal, practical stuff. It was how to do coaching and how to be effective with coaches.
Yeah, I love it, because that's how we train coaches at Empower World, is
how to do this thing called coaching. Of course, there's theories and models behind it, but how do you actually practice it to get the best results? So very interactive. So you chose the ACC, ICF route, became ACC, and then what? Then what happened? What was your journey next?
Well, then I got on with making a living, paying the mortgage, eating hot food, being a coach, designing and delivering leadership programs, and all that was very good. And I then got to a point where I needed to renew my credential. And I thought, rather than renewing the ACC, I might as well go for PCC, the next level of credential. So it was a kind of a practical thing, really. I could either renew ACC again or just stretch a little bit to do the PCC. So I thought, well, let's do the PCC, which I then did. And as you know, they last for 3 years. And there you go.
And did you renew your PCC after 3 years, or did you decide, actually, I want to move into MCC?
I think I can't actually remember. I think I renewed it a second time.
Yeah,
I think I did. And then when it came to renewing it again, I thought, well, you know, the MCC beckoned. It was either doing the MCC or nothing. And it took me back to the horrible old days when I was faced with A-levels many, many decades ago, sadly. And I thought if I just passed these A-levels, I could very happily hold my head up stacking deck chairs at Brighton Beach. Not that there's anything wrong with stacking deck chairs at Brighton Beach, but I thought, but of course then get the A-levels and then move on. And I thought, well, God, if I can just get this degree out of the way, that'll be it for me. But in fact, I then stayed on, and did research. And then my first job was as a teacher. So I trained as a teacher, and I thought, well, if I'm ever going to get anywhere in this job, they were recruiting for a head teacher. They'd all got master's degrees in education. So I thought I need an MEd. So I did that. Then I left teaching. Then I was 20 odd years in a consultancy, during which time I thought, well, actually, I need to know what I know and I need to know what I don't know. So I did an MBA.
Okay.
It's just crazy. So it's part of that, would we call it a disease? To just know what I know. And is it lifelong learning? How can I describe it? It's a pathology, I think, but how can I describe it in a positive way? Lifelong learning. And I thought, okay, this is the next challenge. MCC is the next challenge. Let's do that.
Let's do that. So in order for our listeners to be able to say MCC is the next challenge, you needed to have completed minimum 200 hours of coach-specific training. You needed to have coached at least 2,500 hours. I think it's dropped to that at the moment. You needed to have new mentor coaching to ensure that you had a mentor coach who listened to ensure that you were hitting what we call the MCC markers for ICF. So you had gotten to a stage where you were ready to move to the next level, if we want to call it that.
Yeah, I got countless thousands of hours over many years. Let's not count the years, but let's say the hours were enough. And so it was the next step was just going for MCC.
Yeah. And I just want to caveat something I've said, because actually I've mentored ACC coaches who are doing masterful work. So just because you're an ACC, PCC or MCC, it doesn't mean everybody's doing masterful work, but some people are right at the beginning. So I think that's worth naming for those coaches who think, oh gosh, I have to jump through all these hoops and processes. You might already be doing beautiful coaching with mastery right at the beginning.
Absolutely. Although you will know better than I whether you then have to jump through each of these hoops. I don't know whether you can go from ACC to MCC.
Yeah.
But I completely agree with you.
Yeah. I think it's more than jumping through hoops with ICF, honestly.
No. That was whether you have to go through those stages.
You do.
You're quite right. It doesn't. There's no sort of magic when you get the MCC, and people with ACC could be on no affiliation, could be coaching in a masterly way.
Yeah.
Indeed, one of the first questions I had to ask myself was, do I like this masterful coaching as described by the ICF in order to get an MCC? Because it's a bit of a departure from where I was when I did the ACC, and even when I was doing the PCC. And so one of the first questions was, do I think this approach works? And in actual fact, I said to one of my clients who had been coaching for some while, I said, let's call him Danny, because that's his name. I said, if you don't mind, I need to have a recording for the ICF. So if you don't mind, I'll record one of our sessions. You may notice there's a little difference because I'm trying a different approach. So, and he said, yeah, that's fine. So I did that. And then a week or two later, when we fixed the date for our next coaching session, he said, yeah, brilliant, Roger, that's a great date. If you don't mind, could we do some more of that proper coaching? And I thought, oh, come on, could we do more of that proper coaching? Well, it was a bit of a milestone in my realization that this non-directive master coaching, as described by the ICF for MCC, had something going for it.
Yeah. I remember you telling me that story when we first partnered as mentor and mentee, Roger, and we both smiled at that because the client recognized there was a different essence to the conversation. And you perhaps were not, I'm not saying you had been before, but you were perhaps not offering any advice. You're not being the consultant that you've obviously got the experience to be the consultant. You were trusting that your client had all the wisdom inside himself to work things out for himself.
Yeah, that's the approach. It takes a lot of discipline, a lot of capability or acknowledgement or acceptance of not knowing, a lot of belief in the client having the answers and being able to work it out for themselves. They doing more work than we're doing because that's why they're there. So there was an awful lot of that going on in my mind. Is this as powerful and as transformative as I, A, have been led to believe, and B, that I hope it might be?
Mm.
But so yeah, that was a moment when I thought, okay, yeah, perhaps it is.
Yeah.
And then 3 years later, I've been working on it.
And that's interesting because it wasn't. I think this is important for listeners to know. This is not just about hitting the markers. This is about putting into your practice some ways of being that are maybe different to the model-centered or goal-focused process that you might have taken your clients with before. It's not a simple shift. 3 years of looking at yourself, developing yourself, evaluating your own recordings, giving yourself feedback before you sent them to me, because one of the ways I work is that I say, Roger, send me a recording that you think is going to pass. That's got the ability to move into that space before ever I listen to it. So there's a lot of work that goes into it from the mentee's perspective.
A lot of work. And I remember the first time I sent you a recording, I thought, because I've been a coach a long time and I get fantastic feedback, I get repeat business, and I make a difference, I'm told. So I sent you a recording under the guidance that you offered me to send one I think is pretty good. Wouldn't send you one I thought was rubbish, obviously. And I thought, oh, well, yeah, this'll get through. This is good. It was very early on in our working together. And it reminded me of the time many, many years ago, whenever the National Lottery was launched, in the office I was in, we bought a ticket. We bought one ticket. So convinced were we that it would win that we had a big debate about who would take it home, because it was potentially worth 30 million. And if we couldn't trust each other to take it home, where do we put it? Do we hide it in the office? What if the office is broken into or burnt down? Of course, it had not a single, well, it had a single chance of winning, but it was ridiculous. And I felt the same when I sent the first recording to you. I thought, well, this is good. This will do the job. And of course, it didn't. And a big insight into coaching at any level is that your client is really not the best judge of whether you're a good coach or not, because they don't know what coaching is. Give them loads of great advice. Teach them loads of things. They'll say it was fantastic, but it's not fantastic coaching. So clients are not the best. As somebody like you, as a mentor, a fellow coach, knows what they're doing, can provide so much more value and insight and reflection on the coaching than the client. So it's not good enough that the client finds it brilliant. Commercially, that's great, but it's not a good reflection on the coaching.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? So how do our clients know what's good coaching and what isn't good coaching? How do they know whether they're getting coaching or something else? And how transparent are we in our work? Because there are different forms of coaching that are hugely successful in performance coaching, transactional coaching, goal-focused, solution-focused coaching. Or then there's I think what you're talking about, Rogers, the way I describe it as transformational coaching. So it's a deeper sense of being.
Yes, and it's good to clarify that, because I'm sure I was a good coach.
Yeah.
But it was all of those other varieties and approaches to coaching which we can all espouse, and as you've listed some of them, and there are many others.
Yeah.
But it wasn't offering that transformational coaching that goes far deeper and far wider than otherwise.
Yeah,
coaching might.
I think that's interesting. I did a speaking event at the Sheffield Coaching Exchange on Friday, and my topic was listening beyond words, listening to the echoes that the client brings. So stop asking questions and start paying attention. And that's often a shift coaches notice is they're great at asking questions and moving the client forward, but they've missed a whole load of beautiful metaphors or emotions or body language that actually could help the client see something that is blind to themselves if they start to pay attention. And that was the transition of your work, wasn't it, Roger? From goal-focused and what are you going to do about it, to who are you becoming and what are you noticing about yourself?
Yeah. No, I think that's that's true as an observation, and in a way it prompts me to reflect on key learnings. There may not be a solution that I have or that we get to. As a coach, I have to be satisfied with not knowing, because it's for the client to know. I have to trust the client to have answers and resources for themselves, because their best decision is better than my best advice. I have to know. I have to not have any attachment to the outcome, because we're all committed to helping and supporting our clients to change their lives or change their behavior or change their thinking or their mindset. But we have to do that with deep commitment, but without any attachment to the outcome, because it's their outcome, not ours.
Yeah.
You've got to trust that they've got the answers. So there are all sorts of things like that that inform coaching.
Yeah. And so a coach might say, but how do I give them value if I don't know where we're going, or I don't have an agenda and I'm just letting it evolve in a almost like Gestalt approach? How do I show them that this thing called coaching works? What's your experience of the transition?
Well, we underestimate the importance of listening. We're not listened to. People don't listen to us. And when somebody does, sit down and listen and pay attention. And our clients say things out loud. So holding that space, not interrupting their thinking, creating that provocation to think and reflect, there's the power. And I think it is observable in the way clients will respond to it. In a way, it's a bit like, it's as you have said, listening to what's going on, not to the answer.
Yeah. It's so powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about our process, Roger. So you would you would choose a recording, you would listen to it, you would evaluate yourself, you'd send it to me, and then I would listen to it, evaluate it. I'd listen to it a couple of times to see what we could hear in it, and then we'd sit together and unpack it together. What was the gift in that for you, in the way we worked, listening and unpacking your work in that way?
Well, it revealed what I was not seeing. It disabused me of any notions that the recording was good, or that conformed to, fitted with the parameters of the ICF Master Coaching, and provided so many different cues as to where it could have gone and how that could have been more powerful. And what did I miss? What did the person say? How did they say it? What did that silence mean? What was that? Did I notice the gesture, the face, the head? So all of those non-verbal somatic things, as well as, was I too quick to ask a question? Was I too quick to move on? Did I leave enough space for them? Those sort of reflections that you so insightfully spotted, which I may have missed. Because in the moment of coaching, you've got to respond, you've got to react. And so it isn't knowing how to respond or react, it's having it built in to the instinct you've got in the moment. Yeah. And I've likened coaching to surfing. Do all the training you like, get all the certificates you like, buy the very best equipment, polish your board to within an inch of its life, and then off you go down the beach. But the minute you're facing the currents, the waves, the wind, you don't have time to refer to post-it notes on your screen or on your desk, or refer back to chapter 12 of that book you've just been reading. You're in the moment. You've got to go with it. So actually, the only way to become that kind of coach is to practice that kind of coaching. And if you can practice it with somebody like yourself to point out what's going on, then it's really helpful. So that's the metaphor that I like. And you can read all the books you like, but unless you inspect and listen to your recordings with an expert, and it's visceral and real and in the moment, that's the value.
Yeah. I mean, what I love about mentor coaching for myself as well is it's different to supervision, and it's different to a reflective practice. You're having the container of your coaching in the room, and you're re-looking at it through many different eyes and perspectives with another person, or if you do group mentoring, with a group of people. And we see so much, and there's so much learning that we can take away with us to then practice, which is very different to just self-reflecting or discussing a case with a supervisor. I think supervision is essential, by the way. Please don't get me wrong about that. But I also think mentoring really enhances our work, because it allows us to look at it in a non-egoic way. And actually, I think part of the process of becoming masterful in our work is letting go of our ego. So if we're holding onto that surfboard and we're determined to stay on it no matter what, because we want to look great and strong on the surf, we probably are going to fall board.
Yeah.
But if we're fully present and allow ourselves to be with a wave, we're more likely to be the wave then.
Yeah. And how smooth does it look if somebody's riding the wave? Looks easy. Doesn't look as though they're hanging on to the board. It looks as though they're just stood there going with the waves.
Yeah.
And actually, we can also, as coaches, and I think I learned this from you, we can work too hard. It shouldn't, we shouldn't be, we've done all the hard work in the years of training and mentoring and developing this instinct. It's for the coachee to do the work in the session.
So when I used to say to you, Roger, you look like you're doing a lot of hard work here, what would you be noticing about yourself in the session that might give me that indicator?
Well, probably I might be pursuing a particular direction that I might think is important.
Yeah.
I might not be allowing enough silence. I might even be taking more than my desirable percentage of the time. I might not be picking up on things that they say that could well be important doors to new thinking.
Mm.
So
how did you shift then from kind of wanting to get somewhere to being with whatever was evolving?
Well, the first thing was to take, I mean, I've been coaching a long time, but in trying to master masterful coaching, I reverted to, I hope understandably, to what many new coaches, new to coaching, do, and that is have on my desk prompts, questions, approaches, reminders, things like that. So the first thing to do, because I was trying something new, so I needed the scaffolding to help me. Mm. So the most helpful thing is to just ditch all that and just have an empty table. Because, I can't have the surfing manual in my hand when I'm surfing. I've got to be just there in the moment. So actually, as and when you can, as and when I could, ditched all of that and thought, okay, I'm going to just take the risk of trusting myself and see what happens.
Yeah, love that. And you talk a lot about the lovely Michael Bungay Stanya's work on the advice monster. So when the advice monster, and it does with all of us as coaches because we're human beings and we think we can see something that the client can't see. When your advice monster popped up, how did you manage it? How did you invite it to step outside so that you could let the client do the work?
Well, here's the thing. I think it's based upon the belief that their best decision, as I said a little earlier, is better than my best advice. And if I have ingrained that belief, then I don't need to rely on a technique or a post-it note that tells me don't give advice. If that's my belief, behavior then follows from that belief. So in a kind of a way, it's important to inspect the principles behind your coaching, the beliefs that guide your coaching, and then you will, as it were, by magic, find the appropriate behaviors and questions and approaches and listening emerge. And you weren't even trying, because it's emerged naturally from the set of beliefs and principles that guide your coaching. So that underlying foundation to the coaching is something you and I talked about a lot. So it's not about try this question or use this structure or use this approach. It's who are you when you're being a coach? And what are you believing about coaching? And if you get those two things right, well, when I felt I'd got those two things right, following conversations and mentoring with you, the rest of it followed. Yeah. Because the rest of it emanates from those beliefs. I don't know how many principles and beliefs there are. I've not written them down, but they just have emerged from our conversations.
Yeah.
The other belief may be, listen, well, it's not just words. It's not even just facial expression. It's about body. It's about a grimace. It's about tone of voice. All of those things, if you have to believe those convey something of significance. Whereas if you're sort of still in that point of thinking, let's have a conversation, which is a verbal conversation, your coaching will be very, very different.
Yeah. So a number of coaches, when they think about using working with the body or naming emotions or exploring what's happening inside somebody, they'll go, oh, my clients would run a mile from that, Marie. And I think that's a belief. That's just a belief. You haven't tested it out yet. As your client that you mentioned that said, can you do more of this coaching, Roger? It's fascinating when we have a belief that we're going to hold on to, that the client won't like this type of thing because they're too corporate or they're in this field or that field. I think we do ourselves a disservice as coaches.
Yeah, I think that's true. And tempering that or reassuringly adding to that, I do think we have to start where the coachee is. And I know that you agree with that too. So if somebody's not ready to go deep, we're not aligned with where they are. So it may be that we start with where they are and take them to the deep end. Some people just dive in at the deep end. Other people want to paddle first, but then slowly they're very happy to go deeper, go into the deep. So we have to start where they are, but we can take them to these places where other approaches to coaching could be more transformational.
If they want to, and if we contract for it. So that's a caveat we've talked about a lot. How are we contracting for preparing the client to experiment and to do something that they might not be used to? How are we kind of not surprising them, not shocking them, but gently inviting them to think about, as you mentioned, these other approaches?
And in a way, that's another belief or principle that actually the client's in charge. It's the client's session, they're in charge. They decide what happens. I don't decide. I don't have an agenda. So it isn't for me to say, we're going to do this. It's for me to invite them, would you like to try this?
Yeah.
Is this where you'd like to go? And recontracting two or three or four times even during a coaching session, I notice we started down this avenue, you've brought up this other avenue, so we shouldn't just blindly go up this other avenue. Let me explicitly notice we've got to come to a fork in the road. Would you like to focus on this or the other? They're in charge. And actually, if we keep that fairly well ingrained, that belief that they are in charge, that again will guide what we do and how we do it. And asking permission, recontracting is part of that. Yeah,
absolutely. And so they're in charge of the session, but I'll often say to coaches, you're in charge of being the best coach possible. So how are you arriving to the call? What's your practices for presencing before you get to the call? How are you holding the space for the client so that there is enough trust and rapport and psychological safety to do something that might be a little bit unusual to support the deepening of the awareness? So if you take charge of yourself as a coach and they're in charge of the session, wonderful things can happen.
Yeah. A lot of this is a coach being self-aware, being emotionally intelligent, having had a great deal of self-reflection on the coaching and their beliefs and the principles that guide their coaching. So all of that I bring to a coaching session. I mean, coupled with, for example, to give another example, I'm not going to fill a silence. Socially, I can fill a silence. I don't need to, but I can. But not always, I hope. But in coaching, if they're thinking, I can be sat there thinking to myself, I am not going to be the next one to speak. Unless, of course, they then prompt that because of eye contact, or they stop thinking and they start looking to me and so on and so forth. But, so it's marshalling all of those beliefs, implicit, intuitive or explicit, that is part of what I'll bring to a coaching session. So I make sure I'm the coach I want to be while allowing them to be in charge of the coaching session.
Yeah, love that. So you experimented, you practiced, you recorded lots of sessions, you tried lots of different clients that you worked with. I think that's important to expand your client capabilities and reach. You did all this work. You got 2 recordings. We could see that they were moving into that space of MCC. And then what happened, Roger? So you got these 2 recordings. Tell our listeners, what was the process for you for becoming MCC?
Okay, well, all the other criteria were fulfilled in respect of hours of education and continuing education and hours coached and so on. But the mentoring with you and then the recording of the sessions, I found recording coaches, and it's allowed to, but it can't be a one-off session. You need to be coaching somebody. But that was tricky because somehow they knew what you were doing. So there was a kind of danger of colluding, not with everybody who I coached, but with some coaches who were really trying to help me, thank you. But it became evident. With some of my other coachees, as I've said, we were pursuing an agenda. So it was finding people who are ready for that sort of coaching, because there's no point in recording somebody who isn't ready for that kind of coaching. So yeah, once there were 2 recordings done, and I think my first 2 failed. Failure's good. You find out why. Then I think out the next 2...
Can we just pause there? So I think this is interesting for our listeners. So you sent in 2 recordings that we potentially knew weren't going to get what you wanted. So what was the reasoning for that? Because I think this is important for coaches to hear, Roger.
Okay, well, my PCC needed renewal. But if I applied for MCC, it transcended the need to renew the PCC. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'd run out. So actually, in a way, it was a little bit tactical, if we call it that, because once I'd applied for the MCC, it extended. Yeah. Because I was then on the MCC track. So as you say, we knew the 2 I first submitted were a bit borderline. Well, let's be honest, a lot borderline. So it wasn't a big surprise or disappointment when they failed. It would have been nice. Although I have to say, I've reflected, given the conversations we've had about them, had they passed, I'd been a little bit disappointed because I wasn't really pleased with them. I'd have thought, really? No, they weren't that good. So on reflection, I'm pleased they failed, but it wasn't a surprise. Then I don't know how many iterations there were of me sending recordings in, but eventually 1 passed and 1 failed. Again, not a surprise that 1 passed and 1 failed, but I think a surprise which way round it was, but anyway, that's another matter. And then that was a tremendous relief. I only had 1 more to do. That passed, and I was invited to book in for the exam.
Yeah, I think that's important for coaches who are thinking about applying for MCC to know that it can be, it doesn't mean you send in 2, they fail, you can't do it again. It means that if you send in 2, it fails, you send in 2, one of them passes, that you can keep moving forward until you get the recordings that pass the criteria.
Yeah, because it doesn't mean it was a bad piece of coaching. It may have been very effective. The coachee would have loved it. But did it meet the criteria, the markers, did it demonstrate all of those things that are embodied in the ICF Master Coach competence.
Yeah. So you got that final recording, and tell our listeners the process of what happened between getting that final recording confirmed and then getting your MCC. Yes, you've got it, Roger.
Okay, well, I got the confirmation that my second recording, my final recording, had reached the mark, and I was invited to sit the exam. So I went onto the website, looked at what was available, and my nearest, you can either sit it at home or on your screen, or you can go to a centre. I made a very quick and very easy decision. I would go to a centre because I read the criteria for doing it at home. You had to clear your desk. You more or less had to take all your furniture out of the room. And there was going to be somebody in the corner of my screen looking at me all the time, and I couldn't leave. I couldn't have even a box of tissues on my desk in case I'd written things on. Plus, Pearson examine people who might be doing engineering or maths or bridge building as well as coaches, and I might write a formula on the tissue or whatever it is. And I thought, I can't have all that anxiety. I want to just be able to focus on the questions. So my nearest centre had a vacancy for me 2 months hence, in which case I don't think I'd have even sat it by now.
Okay.
But the centre that I could attend in 5 days' time was 50 miles, an hour's drive away. But I thought, 5 days, will I be ready? The exam, 5 days. How much time do I have? Anyway, I just devoted those 5 days to listening to your podcast with Janine on the core competencies, even going to sleep listening to them, because it was bedtime, I should say, not because it was middle of the day. And also listening to them as I drove to the test centre. All a bit of getting my mind in the head of coaching rather than listening to the news or Radio 2, but it was helpful. I was in the mindset. So I drove, and really, again, I had to put my watch, my mobile phone, not surprised, my car keys, key fob, my handkerchief. I had to put all that in a locker because I may have written something on the edge of the handkerchief. And and actually, it's a 3-hour exam. There's a 5-minute break. Now, again, this is too much detail, forgive me, but I was pouring milk on my cereal in the morning at about 6 o'clock before I drove off, because the exam was at 8 o'clock. I had to get there for 7:30. I was pouring milk on my cereal. I thought, no, Roger, no, you've got a 3-hour exam with only a 5-minute break. Don't have any liquid. So I didn't have any milk. I didn't have a cup of tea. I just had 2 slices of toast and drove off. So you've just got that 5 minutes. So I got there as the first there. I was shown to my cubicle. I was the only person there doing that exam. As I was doing my 3-hour exam, people were coming and going in, high-vis jackets and other sort of whatever they were doing other exams. I've no idea what. So I sat the exam and was given the pass mark. Immediately I left. I exited the room, said thank you very much. And as I asked for the key to my locker, she gave me a piece of paper discreetly folded in half. So I had to, and she knew what it was, so I had to excitedly open it and see that I had immediately passed. It's multiple choice, so you get the result immediately. And you will know the thing, 80-odd scenarios, identify the best thing a coach could do, which is less problematic than the other thing you have to do, which is from the remaining 3, identify which is the most worst thing the coach could do. That was a little harder, I think. However, I passed. I was very pleased with the passing, and that was that. As I drove away from the test centre, I was recognised as a master coach.
Well, huge congratulations. And I know when I got your message, I was jumping for joy as much as you were jumping for joy, as I always feel, whether somebody gets that ACC, that PCC, or that MCC, And going back to the criteria, remember, listeners, they have sample questions on the ICF website of some sample questions for each of the criteria, and that all of the criteria is based on the 8 core competencies. And Roger mentioned our podcast. Janine and I did a series of recordings, I think it's from episode 180 onwards, where we look at them in detail and practical applications. And so many people have given us feedback that supported them to get their credentials. So thank you for naming that was useful for you, Roger.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that's it. Is that it? No more studying, no more development, no more growth?
Well, as we mentioned before we started recording, I posted it as one does on LinkedIn, and I was absolutely delighted to have 280 odd people congratulating me. Some saying you were a master before this, you were recognised as a master, which is rather nice of them. And another client only last week said, Roger, how many people do you know? 280 people from all over the world congratulating you. So I didn't do that immediately, but I did that after 2 or 3 or 4 days. And what from here? I will be back for more mentoring, Marie. I will be interested to talk with other coaches about my being an MCC and what it means. But as for my clients, they probably don't know, and they probably don't care, because they don't know what it involves. They know the outcome of the coaching. But my clients, my buyers, my sponsors, if you like, it's meaningful to them. May also be meaningful to clients, because being recognised as a master coach, even if they don't know about coaching, it's an external affirmation, isn't it? So, but on a very personal and emotional kind of base level, if that's how to describe it, I'm very, very satisfied. You know, having thought I was a good coach, it's nice to have an external kind of validation that you know what you're doing, Roger, which is exactly the motivation I had for the MBA, MEd, the other. So it's just, why do I need that? That's just my psychopathy. It's nice to have the affirmation. It's very satisfying personally, which is why I did it, really, because there's no commercial payoff to it immediately and obviously, but very, very satisfying personally and as a coach. And it was not just for the credential. It was for the coaching, the learning, the awareness, and so as they say with dogs, you know, it's not just for Christmas, it's for life. And I think the mentoring with you, Marie, was not just for the credentialing, it was for life.
No.
And it will inform the coach. It continues to inform the coaching.
I think in my own experience of my own mentoring, it still impacts my work, and I still use it for preparation, for presencing for myself in the coaching session. So there's a lot of professional as well as personal development, I think, that it takes to move into that space of being able to be emotionally mature enough to be in that beautiful space of the client's world and explore it. Roger, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. If people want to find out about who you are and what you do, how can they do that?
The best place would be on LinkedIn and look for Roger Fielding of Roger Fielding Consulting Limited. Thank you. There aren't many Roger Fieldings. You wouldn't have a baby today and christen it Roger, would you? So LinkedIn, I'm there on LinkedIn. You'll find me there. I've written a few blog posts, one about coaching is like surfing, and some reflections on some of the stuff I've talked about. So yes, thank you. That's where I am.
Great. And you did mention before we started this call, I think you're going to write something about your MCC journey as well, so people can find out about that on your blog.
They can. And I also do mentoring with Ellipsis Coach Development, which again you'll find on LinkedIn.
Lovely. Roger, any words of wisdom to close off our podcast for our listeners today?
Find, if you're keen to develop your coaching competence, find a mentor coach, because that's probably the fastest, best, most personal and bespoke development intervention. So make sure you're able to partner with your mentor in a way that works for you. So the time I spent with Marie, for example, was not just practically instrumental to get mentoring done. It of course was very enjoyable. So, it's got to be, hasn't it? You've got to enjoy it. You've got to have trust in your mentor. So I think that's probably the piece of advice I would give. Getting a mentor coach. Perhaps secondarily, I would say, relax. If you've done the training and you coaching, let the client do the work. All of your work has been done in the years you've spent doing coaching. So trust your instinct. Throw the Post-it notes away and just launch onto the waves, the wind, the currents, and see what happens. Record it and learn from it.
Beautiful, Roger. I don't think there's anything in addition that needs to be said. Listeners, if you've enjoyed hearing Roger and myself talk about this journey, let us know. Leave a comment. Share it with other coaches who might be on the journey, who might find this useful. If you'd like to be on the podcast and you have something you'd like to talk about, to share with other coaches and support them in their development, get in touch with us. We love having guests as well as talking about our own experience on this podcast. Like, share, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Marie. Great to talk with you again.
Thanks for listening. You can find out more about us on our website, www.empower-world.com, and on our social media networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Be empowered.